legacies or Al-Wasiyyah is one of the means where a generation transfer its acquired wealth to the coming generation to ensure sustainability of wealth. But then these are issues where no stone is left unturned to ensure that either administratively or by volition, the law ensures that it oversees how this devolution is done or passed on to posterity. Like we are all aware, Islamic law itself is a comprehensive system itself, ensuring that it protects the interests and protects the rights of individuals who call themselves followers of the Islamic faith. So in this regard, we look at the concept of Al-Wasiyyah as a whole and how it proposes of large essence to the entire Muslim Ummah, even in countries where Islam is not their primary source of law. There are instances where they also try to approach the system and see how it's of benefit, to see one of the things that they can learn from and then mix up with other systems that works in those countries. So in this regard, we have come with this notion of speaking to this discourse and then ensure that we learn one or two things in the course of our gathering here today. While we're waiting for the guest speaker to join us and which will commence properly the webinar, I've been instructed to try and engage one or two persons here to see, in order to actually add to the existing pool of knowledge, let's try to have a short interactive session to understand the importance of this discourse. So let me to ask the house in the course of having interactive session, if anyone can shed light into what he or she understands so far about Al-Wasiyyah, to know whether at the end of today's gathering we're going to learn more than we have actually know before. So permit me to throw it into the house as a succinct interactive session amongst us here. Can someone enlighten us what he or she understands so far about Al-Wasiyyah? All right, Mr. Abdurraheem, please have the floor.
Okay, thank you for having me. And thank you for this opportunity. May Allah reward us also and the rest of the team. What I understand by Wasiyyah is divinely revealed system by which the owner of all wealth decides how the wealth he has given an individual to be distributed upon the demise of the trustee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdulgafar Balogun. Thank you. I think yes. Thank you, Mr. Abdulgafar Balogun. He has actually outlined that it is how the supreme being, the divine lawmaker himself, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, has ensured that the evolution of wealth transferred from one generation to the other. So I said that perhaps that might not even be comprehensive. Maybe someone wants to add a thing or subtract another thing from it. We wouldn't mind within the short rules, yeah, certainly. In absence of addition or subtraction, permits me to move to the next item on the agenda, which is calling on one of the speakers to do justice to the input that has been given, which is Al-Wasiyyah and women and the society. Inheritance of women in the society. Before we actually go into that, and before we meet the speaker itself, we are all aware that we've come a long way as a human race when it comes to ownership, when it comes to identification of the gender in the society. And even before today that we are enjoying recognition of both gender as having distinctive important status, we've come a long way from the situation where in the West, women do not have opportunity to own property or do not have opportunity to do things of their own volition without the consent of their spouses. or the time where women have not had privilege to vote independently, or let's say the time where women were not given the much deserved opportunity to be identified as an individual of their own. But Islam has come to ensure that all these anomalies have been rectified to the extent of inheritance that we have to talk about. For permit me to a new speaker, Mrs. Omani, justice to topic, justice to the topic. In the interim, doing that, the speaker joins, and then we'll take the other topic that has been given. So without further ado, I would like to read the profile of the Amibi speaker in our gathering today. So Mrs. Umo Ani Amin is the managing partner of Metropolitan Law Firm and Metropolitan Skills Limited with over 17 years experience. She oversees the delivery of range of complex legal assignments at Metropolitan Law Firm, making the firm amass a growing list of high-powered clients. She is also a certified PPP expert from the Institute of Public and Private Partnership, Washington, and has significant interest and experience in property law, trust, capital market law, communication law, environmental law, oil and gas law, Islamic personal law, and Islamic finance law. This has made companies trust her to advise them on a range of litigation and corporate law. Amongst others, she serves as a company secretary for Capegate, who is a market leader in the innovative sourcing, aggregation, and deployment of micro-utilities. She is a leading non-interest finance scholar. She is a leading non-interest finance scholar in Nigeria. And through our brainchild, the Africa International Conference of Islamic Finance. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mrs. Umani Amin to the topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and good morning, distinguished participants. Thank you for inviting me to speak about this very important topic. Being a woman myself, a Muslim woman who has gone through the rigors of and complexities of inheritance personally, I got interested very much in this topic, and I would like to just go through what it is, and hopefully we will be able to benefit one way or the other from what I am going to be speaking about. Thank you very much again. So the topic of today is Islamic law of inheritance, women and the society. So I'll start by introduction. So Fara'id, or the Islamic law of inheritance, provides the basis for estate distribution according to Islam. The law of inheritance is deeply rooted in the principles outlined in the Quran and the Hadith, and are designed to ensure fair distribution of wealth within the families. The rights and entitlements of each Quranic heir are clearly stated in the verses of the Quran, and these verses form the basis of Fara'id. If you look at Surah Al-Nisa chapter verses 11, 12, and 176, from these verses we can be able to deduce that Fara'id is an application upon the demise of a Muslim, and that entitlements will be distributed after honoring the legacies and the settlements, the legacies of the deceased, like the settlement of debt to the estate, and that such burial expenses are also incurred and are distributed, and loans and other debts owned by the deceased, like unpaid zakat, unpaid kafara, and a pledge, etc. And of course, bequest and Wasiyyah have been taken care of. So this presentation aims at delving into the Islamic law of inheritance itself concerning women's rights and the challenges they encounter in the society when seeking their rightful shares of inheritance. We will also explore the concepts of Islamic inheritance and estate planning tools that can be used to ensure a smooth distribution of the assets after one's passing. As we progress, we will also shed light on the Quranic inheritance distribution and the provisions it lays out for women, emphasizing the principles of gender equity and financial security within the Islamic framework. So, women's rights in Islam, we'll start with that. Islam teaches that men and women are equal in the sight of Allah. Both are equally accountable for their deeds and both have the same opportunities to attain spiritual closeness to God through faith and good actions. That is why Allah in the Quran has mentioned men and women regardless. Al-Zakari wal-Unsa. So Islam recognizes and protects the rights of women in various aspects of life, including the rights to education, right to own property, right to work, right to inheritance, and the right to be treated with respect and kindness. Islam views men and women as having complementary roles rather than being in competition with one another. So both genders have specific responsibilities within the family and the society, and their cooperation is essential for the well-being of the community. Islam acknowledges the importance of economic independence of women. Women have the right to own and manage their property, engage in business, and participate in economic activities. Islamic teachings emphasize social justice, and this extends to women's rights as well as women that it discourages women or it discourages anyone who is going to discriminate or put in injustice against women, and then advocates for the fair treatment of individuals regardless of their gender. Islam does not prohibit women from holding leadership positions, which is now talked about in most ulamas speak about that women are not supposed to hold certain positions in leadership. That is not true. Islam has really helped women in exploring positions in leadership. And then these fields include education, politics, social affairs, and history has shown that has shown examples of prominent women, Muslim women who are leaders and scholars in our Islamic societies. For example, Aisha radiallahu anha has been quoted so many times, narrating deeds and narrating histories in Islam, and she has been listened to as one of the greatest women scholars in Islam. Islam also emphasizes the concept of modesty and encourages an environment that protects women's dignity and safety. This is seen in the Islamic dress code and the principles of lowering your gaze as a woman and avoiding inappropriate behaviors. Islam provides women with the right to choose their spouse, the right to consent to marriage, and the right to fair and respectful treatment within the marriage. This has been exhibited, of course, in the marriage of Fatima and Ali, anhum, where the Prophet, I remember the story, the Prophet had, Ali had come to the Prophet because a few other men had come to the Prophet to ask for Fatima's hand in marriage, but the Prophet ﷺ did not say anything until Ali, whose aunt had had probed him to come because he was ashamed. He did not have anything to offer Fatima according to him. So he came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, sat down and greeted the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and kept quiet. The Prophet asked him, "What brings you here, Ali?" And he bowed his head. "Did you come to ask for Fatima's hand in marriage?" And he said, "Yes." So that process took place. But then the long and short of it is that the Prophet ﷺ went to Fatima and said to her, "Ali had asked for your hand in marriage." And she bowed her head in embarrassment because she couldn't raise her head to speak to her father like that. And he asked her again, and she smiled and turned her face. So that indicated that consent, and that proves that for a woman to get married, her consent must be sought out for before she gets married. And that is one of the rights that have been infringed on, especially where I come from. But this is a right given to all women to choose what they want to do, to consent to whatever is fair, and to be treated rightly. Going for Islam, Islam provides women with the right to choose their spouse and to do whatever they feel is appropriate within the dictates of the Shariáh. The Islamic system acknowledges the significance of women in the society and affirms their right to own, distribute, and inherit property, reflecting their essential contributions to the well-being and the prosperity of the family as a unit and the society at large. So women, including daughters, wives, mothers, and sisters, are entitled to specific shares tailored to cater for their financial responsibilities and obligations within the family structure. Islamic law sets out strict and rigid inheritance rules that determine how a Muslim's estate can be distributed between the deceased heirs and that is after his demise. The law further limits testamentary freedom to 1/3 of the deceased estate after the deduction of funeral expenses and debts and other things. So it means that as a deceased, you have a right to only 1/3, and this is based on the prophetic tradition where a companion of the Prophet had asked that he wants to donate everything he has to the cause of Islam. And the Prophet said to him, "No, you cannot." He said, "Okay, half of it." He said, "No, you cannot." He said, "Okay, 1/3 of it." And the Prophet ﷺ agreed to 1/3. He said, "Okay, 1/3 and only 1/3. Not more than 1/3. So Islam has provided a specific area where you can give out 1/3 of your property according to your will. So heirs can be divided into 3 categories. We have the Quranic heirs who are mentioned in the Quran specifically, and then we have the agnetic heirs or the residuary heirs, and we have the uterine heirs and the distant kindred. So the Quranic heirs, in the presence of the Quranic heirs, then you are not entitled to inherit. In their absence, then you come to the agnetic heirs or the residuaries. Residuaries, so the Quranic heirs are, of course, the mother, father, daughters, and so on and so forth. Then it goes back to if a deceased died, if a person dies without children, then some of his agnetic heirs will inherit. If he dies, some people, the absence of some Quranic heirs then welcomes the agnetic heirs and so on. For the agnetic heirs, you inherit the one that your sibling that is the same mom and dad with you will inherit first. and exclude the others, then the one that is the same dad with you will inherit first, excluding the one that is just the same one with you. And then thereafter, of course, the one that has the same mother with you, it shows, of course, that the affinity of the father is stronger than that of the mother in the laws of inheritance. But that's also another topic. So moving forward, the Quranic heirs or the sharers are those relations of the deceased, like I had mentioned, whose shares have been determined by the Quran. Their share and the order of preference in succession and fixed always fixed under the Quran. They are 12 in number. The husband, the wife, the father, the grandfather, the grandmother, the daughter, the son's daughter, the germane sister, that is the same parents like I had mentioned, and then the consanguine sister, the same father, and then the uterine sister, who is the same mother with the deceased, or the uterine brother, as the case may be. So Islam and the primary heirs among the Quranic heirs include the father, mother, husband, wife, and daughter, and are never excluded from the inheritance. Through their share may be reduced in certain circumstances, which we will see in the later part of this presentation. However, their entitlement to inheritance is subject to the rules of the application of Shariáh. So the agnetic heirs commonly consist of male and sometimes female relatives that inherit as residuaries after the share of the Quranic heirs are distributed. It is also noteworthy to note that the Quran does not explicitly mention the shares of a male relative, such as the deceased son, but provides the rule that the son shares on just on women. So the uterine heirs or distant kindred includes any blood relation who is not a Quranic heir or agnetic heir. Like I said, I have a table which shows what excludes, who excludes who and who gets what according to the Quran. So I have on this spread the heir, the condition, the entitlement, etc. So for the husband, the wife leaves children, he gets 1/4. The wife does not leave children, he gets half. And for the wife, if the husband leaves children, gets 1/8, and the husband does not have children, she gets 1/4. For the father, the deceased leaves children, he gets 1/6, and then the deceased does not have children, he gets 1/6 and the residue. Residue means after dividing whatever is remaining, then the father gets. Then for the mother, the deceased leaves children of the deceased. The deceased leaves children, or the deceased does not have children, or more than one germane sister, she gets 1/6. And then the deceased leaves no children and only one germane sister, she gets 1/3. For the son, if he's the only son, he gets residue. Inherits with a daughter, then they get into the ratio of 2:1. And inherits with a son, they get half each. For the daughter, if she's the only child, she gets half. And more than one daughter, they get 2/3 of whatever the estate is. And then the uterine brother and the uterine sister, in the absence of father, brother, sister, and the child of the deceased, and the only Quranic heirs, they get 1/6. And in the absence of father, brother, sister, and child of the deceased, and they are more than one, they get 1/3. So these are basically just the the Quranic heirs that have been mentioned in the Quran. So there are things to this to the application of this fara'id. And the condition of succession is number one. So fara'id can only apply upon the demise of the person. The entitlement under fara'id is only applicable to the Quranic heirs who survived the deceased at the point of death. This includes even a fetus. A person can only inherit in cases where they are not excluded from inheritance, either through exclusion by the Quranic heirs or by impediment of inheritance. An example of exclusion by other Quranic heirs is where the existence of a son would exclude the consanguine brother of the deceased from inheriting. Exclusion by impediment refers to the circumstances such as difference in religion and the killing of the deceased, that's homicide. So the cause of inheritance can happen only through marriage or kinship, that is blood relationship. And the impediment to inheritance, in the impediment, there are several factors that may impede one's right to inherit. Homicide, if you are being accused of killing the deceased, then you are not entitled to inheritance. And then, of course, difference of religion. So a non-Muslim mother cannot inherit the properties of her deceased Muslim son. However, there are estate planning tools that can be used to ensure that the non-Muslim mother benefits only up to the maximum of the 1/3, which I had mentioned earlier that every Muslim is entitled to give out. So you are entitled to do as you wish with your 1/3, but of course the rest you have no choice on it because it has been decreed in the Quran how it should be divided. So prior to the distribution of the estate, the execution of the following are extremely important. That is the settlement of the deceased burial expenses, the payment of debts, the payment of zakah or vows and kafara. So if you vow that this will happen even after you are gone, this should happen like probably you have vowed to take someone to Saudi, for example, or you have vowed to make sure that this person gets educated and often gets educated or something like that. So if you mention that, then it must also be honored if when you're gone. So if there are claims against the estate, that also will be done with. Then if you leave a legacy or a bequest, this is done in Al-Wasiyyah. So it is also not worthy that there are restrictions on even bequest under the Islamic law, which are that no bequest is in favor of the Quranic heirs. So if you leave a bequest, then your Quranic heirs are already enjoying the favors of the Quran. They already have their shares as stipulated in the Quran and are not entitled to any bequest. But others are, of course, not your Quranic heirs. And bequest shall not exceed 1/3. Like I had mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet had said 1/3 and only 1/3, not more than 1/3. After this is also done after the paying out of the testator's debts. So Islamic inheritance takes into account also the financial responsibilities and obligations that each gender typically assumes within the family structure. It opines that women often do not bear the same financial responsibilities as male heirs throughout their lives because the financial obligations of daughters, sisters, wives, or mothers should be generally covered by the male family. And that is why it is stipulated that a man gets half the female gets half of what the male gets, to make members like the father, brothers, husbands, or sons, and their respective portions apply towards other responsibilities. Thus, the application of shares takes these factors into account to ensure financial security and support for women within the family. Islamic inheritance ensures that both male and female heirs receive a fair distribution of the wealth, considering their specific roles and responsibilities. It is also essential to note that Islamic law allows individuals to plan their estate. Estate planning is a process of determining the devolution of one's property or estate for the purpose of achieving preset goals after one's death. So if you plan your estate, it means that even after your death, everything will be followed appropriately as you have mentioned or has willed. So the Islamic estate planning process must also ensure and take into account that the financial affairs of all legal heirs and beneficiaries are adequately addressed. It means that as a person, Islam does not allow you, especially if you have reached a certain age, that you do not even possess the mental capacity to think rationally, then you are not even allowed to spend as much, because it is decreed that you must leave your estate to your heirs. The essential difference between estate planning for Muslims and non-Muslims lies in the fact that Muslim estates are subject to the Islamic law. This position has been affirmed in the Supreme Court decision of Juddun versus Abuna, where it was held that where a Muslim dies, his heirs are permitted by law to appoint a learned person in Islamic law to share his estate among them according to such law, and if subsequently the matter is taken before a court of law, that court will enforce the sharing provided it conforms with the Islamic law. Islamic estate planning is ever crucial because Sharia seeks to protect and promote the values, namely your faith, your life, your lineage, your intellect, and property, and validates measures for the preservation and advancement. That is where Sharia-compliant estate planning tools are effectively applied. The process upholds, promotes, and preserves the aforementioned Islamic values. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu narrated that Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, said it is not prudent for a Muslim who has something to give as a bequest, that is Wasiyyah, to have it for 2 nights without having his will written regarding it. So this emphasizes the importance of also leaving a will as a Muslim. If you are going to travel, I remember one of the scholars, whenever that we invite here, Sheikh Ziyad, he tells us that whenever he is coming, even to Nigeria, most times he sits his family to tell them, okay, in case I don't come back, this is what you should do, this is what you should do. So you don't leave anything unknown when you're gone. May Allah make it easy. So this emphasizes the importance of making a will for all Muslims and the strict warning of Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, to serve as a reminder that everyone has something that can be distributed, must have a testament showing how it should be distributed. And the objectives of Islamic estate planning are that providing funds for your funeral expenses and debts, then ensuring efficient control and management of one's assets after death, ensuring assets get to rightful heirs in accordance with Islam, etc. Example of estate planning tools will include Wasiyyah, that's a will, and then a trust or waqf. These are charitable endowments, and then hiba or gift, etc. So all of these will need more explanations, but I will not delve into them because of the timings. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu again narrated that the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, said it is prudent for a Muslim to have a bequest, that is a wasiyyah, to have it for 2 nights. One significant challenge lies in the misinterpretation or misapplication of Islamic law of inheritance. Some individuals or communities may incorrectly interpret these laws, leading to unfair practices against women. This distortion can perpetuate gender inequality and restrict women's access to their rightful shares of inheritance. In some societies, there are entrenched cultural norms which prioritize male heirs over female heirs. This preference, of course, results into an unequal distribution of inheritance, depriving women of their rightful entitlements. But these are cultural practices that might perpetuate societal bias against women, limiting their financial independence and social status, of course. Women may not fully be aware of their rights to inheritance due to the lack of education and awareness. So it is absolutely very necessary that women and men alike should understand the rules of Shariáh and should take appropriate measures in, of course, planning their estates, which will really help out, because we have seen a lot of things happening regarding the law of inheritance, especially after the demise of the deceased. From my experience, I know that my father had left a will saying what should be done, but because there is no understanding of the true essence of what it is to distribute your estate according to how you want it. People said because he is a Muslim, he's not even allowed to leave a will, so they are not going to follow it. So a lot of people, a lot of Muslims still believe that, no, you don't leave a will. Leaving a will is for the non-Muslims, that Allah has already distributed everything in the Quran. And so you don't need to bother about who should get what and how you should do it. When you're gone, you're gone. It's nobody's business what happens to your asset. So, but these are wrong assumptions, because Allah has provided and the Prophet ﷺ has provided ways upon which you can be able to take advantage of how your wealth should be distributed according to the way you want it. Family and societal pressures can significantly usually impact on women's claim and rights to their rightful inheritance share. Women may face resistance or criticisms from family members and society, leading to self-restraint or reluctance to assert their rights. The legal obstacle will be in some regions, legal systems may not adequately protect women's inheritance rights. This lack of legal safeguards can hinder women from claiming what is rightfully theirs and perpetuate the marginalization of women in inheritance. So navigating through the inheritance claims, women should educate themselves about Islamic inheritance laws as outlined in the Quran and Hadith, and to understand their entitlements and legal rights as heirs. And women can utilize Islamic estate planning tools to protect their heirs and desired beneficiaries. This also allows women to address specific needs, support charitable causes, or provide for individuals who cannot be their direct legal heirs. In case of disputes or resistance from family members, seeking family mediation or counseling can also help facilitate open dialogue and understanding. Mediation services can bridge cultural gaps and ensure that Islamic inheritance principles are upheld while maintaining family harmony. Over the years, there has been notable progress in raising awareness about women's inheritance rights. Legal reforms have been implemented in some countries to align civil laws with Islamic principles, ensuring more equitable distribution of assets. Women's rights organizations and advocacy groups have played a pivotal role in promoting gender equity in inheritance practices. Educational initiatives and awareness campaigns have also empowered women to assert their rights and navigate the inheritance process. We can also express optimism, but to effectively address the challenges, there is a need for legal reforms, increased education and awareness about women's rights, and a cultural shift towards promoting gender equality, empowering women and knowledge about their inheritance rights, and encouraging a more inclusive interpretation of Islamic teachings can pave way for a fair and just distribution of inheritance within the society. And of course, lastly, by overcoming these challenges, Islamic societies can ensure that women are empowered financially, secure, and treated with the dignity of respect they rightfully deserve. Thank you very much again. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Omani, for the comprehensive discussion on the right of women to inheritance and the perception of the society. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we are able to learn notable points about the discourse, Islamic law of inheritance, the women and the society. And while I will be taking prospective questions for our speaker, I would like us to have a recapitulation of what the speaker just discussed. So once again, thank you, Mrs. Umani, for the presentation, because ordinarily, Islamic law of inheritance, as we all know, is a wide area of law under Islamic law. And no matter what time allotted to discuss it, it will never be enough to still do justice to the in-depth of that very discourse. However, you're able to assist us to discuss the cogent points that we can learn from and pass to posterity in respect of this particular topic, one of which is establishing, in the course of the sequence of representation, you first establish the right of women, that women and the male counterparts are equal in the sight of the Almighty in respect of their ibadah and their deed. Then we went to talking about this law of inheritance itself, particularly splitting it into what we know as Al-Wasiyyah and the counterpart, which is Fara'id. So Al-Wasiyyah, is that one, you have the free will to do that. You have the power to actually distribute that estate. However, subject to a restriction, which is 1/3, as you've rightly given us the sources, the primary sources which backs that principle. And then we have Fara'id in instance where where you have actually exercised your power. The other ones are under the compulsory promulgation of the Islamic law, and amongst which you made us understand the types of heirs that we have under Islamic law. We have the Quranic heirs, we have the residual agnatic heirs, and we have the distant kindred. And then we move further to discuss the percentage accrued to these heirs as provided by the Fara'id. And then we generally talked about the rights of women, the challenges of women, and then given resolution to ensure that these challenges are, if not totally curbed, but they are justly mitigated. Thank you very much once again for that. I believe I am one of the good listeners to your lecture, and then what I learned is going to go me across time. However, I strongly believe there are persons who haven't listened to you very well, like I did. They have some questions that they want to ask to clarify the gray areas which formed in their mind while they were listening attentively to you, ma. One of the questions here, while the floor will be open for that, for questions briefly, but one attendee by Mr. Hassan Salami, he asked that, are there provisions to ensure gifts do not exceed that of the Quranic heirs? Again, are there provisions to ensure the gift, the bequest, does not exceed that of Quranic heirs? So that's the question. While there are opportunities for others to ask questions, I believe that's the only one I have. That's the only one I have for now.
So the gifts, it has already been mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that the Prophet had encouraged that you can give 1/3 and only 1/3. I had mentioned in the prophetic tradition where the Sahaba came and said he wants to, for the love of Islam, he wants to donate everything he has left. He has. And the Prophet said to him, no, you cannot do that. He mentioned, okay, he wants to give half of what he has. And the Prophet again said no. And he said, how about 1/3? The Prophet said, okay, but only 1/3 and not more than 1/3. So you cannot gift, if 1/3 of your asset, of course, 1/3 of your asset will now be, is not the same as 2/3 of what is left. So it means that it can never be more than, what you give out can never be more than what your heirs will inherit. And that's the rule. Thank you.
All right. Permit me to do a quick addendum to that, because I think I try to align my thought to the person that asked. Okay, before I give my addendum, another person then ask, if parties, then in bracket now, surviving wife and children from 4 women have filed terms of settlement which contradict. Sorry, this question is from Miss Titilola Olatunde Fashogbon. Miss Titilola Olatunde Fashogbon. So she asks, if parties, surviving wife and children from 4 women have filed terms of settlement which contradict the Quranic 1/3 that should be given to the wife, can it be challenged in court? Again, if parties have filed terms of settlement which contradict the Quranic 1/3 that should be given to the wife, can it be challenged in court?
So what do you mean terms of settlement? Because the Quran has already specified who the Quranic heirs will be. And he has mentioned, like I have said, the husband, the wife, the father, the grandmother, the grandfather, the daughter, and of course, I had said that it's only the son that is not mentioned, but there were specific instructions that the female should get half of what the male should get. So if a husband dies leaving one wife, she gets a certain percentage of 1/4. If he has multiple wives, of course, they share in the 1/4. So I do not understand what she meant with terms of settlement. Settlement as against the dictums of the Quran is null and void. If, of course, the deceased is a Muslim, he lived his life as a Muslim and he has not explored the estate planning tools like gifts during his lifetime, like a waqf, an endowment fund during his lifetime, or any other tool that he might have used. He's only entitled to give out, of course, 1/3 I had mentioned. So every other thing I think will be null and void, because it is not in tandem with what the Quran had mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma. Thank you. Another question says, is there a difference between hiba and wasiyyah? Please kindly distinguish or speak to similarities. Is there a difference between hiba and wasiyyah?
So wasiyyah is a will. Hiba is a gift mentioned in the wasiyyah. That is all. Wasiyyah is your typical will, like the English will, where you will mention that this should be done, this will be done, this will be done. That is a wasiyyah for you. But hiba means gift. So in your wasiyyah, you can mention that, okay, I want to gift out so amount of money or this asset to Ummahani when I'm gone. So this hiba will fall within also your 1/3. Except if you had promised during your lifetime, of course, even if you had promised during your lifetime that I will give to Ummahani so when I die, even if you don't put it in the wasiyyah, of course, witnesses have heard you that you want to give. So after your debt has been settled, everything else has been settled, then it will be mentioned that, oh, I heard the deceased says he wants to give Ummahani so amount, or this estate or that estate, and then it will be indicated in the will. So wasiyyah is will, a deceased way of saying this is how I want my estate to be distributed or divided after I am gone. And then of course hiba is a gift. So these are Arabic terms. One is will and one is gift. Thank you.
All right, ma'am. Thank you very much. The other question from the same speaker is asking, the speaker is adding work to the question. So it's now like difference between work, wasiyyah, and hiba.
Yes, so I had mentioned that a waqf is a form of a gift that is irrevocable. You cannot revoke it. And waqf can be done for a cause. Waqf means an end. This is based on the story of Osman ibn Affan. So Osman ibn Affan was a very wealthy companion of the Prophet. In Medina, when the Prophet came in, of course, people converted to Islam, and they were Jews. So these wealthy Jews owned a well. And these Muslims come in to take out of it, and non-Muslim as well, but he charges for it. So Osman ibn Affan now went to say, okay, I want to buy this well. He refused. He said, okay, I want to buy half of it. And half of it means that, so the Jew agreed to sell half of this well to Osman ibn Affan. And so he made it a waqf. A waqf is an Arabic word that means stop. So all your rights and obligations on a certain property, if you have given it out for waqf, stops. Then it's for a specific purpose. It can be for education, it can be for health reasons, for anything you want. You want this waqf to stay. So coming back to the story of Osman ibn Affan, radiallahu anhu, he said, okay, I want half of this well. So they divided it and shared the days upon which the use of the well will be apportioned to the two shareholders. So on the days for Osman ibn Affan, all the Muslims come to take water from the well. Fi sabilillah, he wasn't charging them anything. And on the day of the Jew, of course, people come and then they buy the water. So it happened that everyone else was waiting for Osman ibn Affan's day to come, and they will come and take this water for free. And the Jews saw that he wasn't getting anything out of it, and he sold everything to Usman ibn Affan. And that is the bedrock of the Usman ibn Affan Waqf up until today. It's 1,400 years old, and it has been used for different purposes: education, hospitals, and everything charitable, you name it. It started from the well, then he now planted all the dates, and these dates were just given out in charity. But then it became also, they started to sell the dates and to pay for education for the sick people and everything that is needed as a social way of helping people. And this is what we have up until today. So Waqf is a form of gift to everyone, which needs that, for which the Waqf is being used for. And it is forever. You cannot come and say you don't want, even though now there are beginning to be exceptions. Like the estate where I live is a Waqf, is an education trust fund. So the owner of this, the initiator of this Waqf, has about 150 flats and terrace buildings and all that, all for Waqf. He has given it out. So it's for education, and he gives out scholarship, and of course all members of his family benefit from this Waqf if it's education. If you have children, then he's educating them, his grandchildren, and even his children. They can go to any school in the world and the Waqf will take care of it. So this is a form of gift. He has gifted it during his lifetime, and it will continue. And it has a structure. It has the trustees who will be looking after the affairs of the Waqf. And of course, for you to be, for it to be sustainable, we have always advised that you should go to an institutional trustee. And that is why we have, I think we've been partnering so far with Bequest trustees to do Islamic trusts and Waqf, so that when you when you create a Waqf, then it's forever. So you don't want anything to tamper with it, because you have already made your intentions. And then these institutional trustees will look after this Waqf until forever. So that will be my explanation regarding that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ma. While we said we have other questions, but we'll limit it now. We'll take 2 short ones so we can move to the next item in the agenda. One here is summarily saying that can he benefit from a gift whilst he can still be subject to inheritance?
No, he cannot. I had mentioned that in my presentation, that if you want to give your heirs gifts, the general rule is you give them during your lifetime. And these gifts are absolute. They do not have any condition attached to it. Once you have a condition to the gift, then it will not pass the test of a gift under Islam. For example, we have a client who wanted to give out some of his assets to his children, but he wants to have the usufruct. That means he will be taking the rentals and all that and living his life until he's gone, then it becomes absolute. But we told him, no, it's not possible. Gift is absolute. You give it now without any condition. It does not have any condition. So the thing is that a gift is different. Please give the position of the scholars and him. What did he say? He said the position of the scholar not be given to the heirs as there is. No, they cannot be. You can only give your beneficiaries gifts during lifetime. You're gone, then whatever is left is for inheritance purposes, and it will be shared according to the dictum of the Quran.
All right. Thank you very much, man. Thank you once again for your comprehensive analysis of the discourse. We appreciate you. Although whilst I acknowledge that there are other questions being in here, permit me, because of time, to move further. However, your questions will be entertained. We should be rest assured that we have scholars that are on ground readily to answer your questions. And one of the ways which you can actually attend about that is we'll quickly mention to you that you can actually visit our office at Victoria Island, number 11 Okwawu Street, Victoria Island, Lagos. For some of you who still have numerous questions to ask, who have interest in going further with the knowledge of this aspect of finance and every other aspect of Islamic finance, including but not limited to other commercial areas of it, we'll gladly welcome you to number 11 Okwawu Street, Victoria Island, Lagos. We are ready to answer your questions and also discuss other areas of these laws with you. And hopefully, we know that you'll be satisfied with our responses. Thank you very much, Mrs. Umar. So without further ado, we'll be moving on to the next item on the agenda of this webinar, which is the lecture from Justice Imam Sayi. And as even laying a solid foundation to what we'll be listening from Justice Imam Sayi is part of the lectures we heard from Mrs. Amin, talking about the part of our lecture speaks to the concurrence of this Wasiyyah itself and the conventional practices, which brought about the case of Jidun versus Abuna, right? There are instances, because particularly now, here, I think one of the questions asked, can a person bequest 100% of his gifts? It has already been discussed in the lecture. You're only entitled to 1/3, meaning outside that 1/3, the rest of it is now subject to what the law guides that. So it's almost similar to what we have in the conventional system, where where you are intestate, you have power to give out your will, but if you die intestate, the law takes over. But however, the difference here is that there are guiding principles in Islam that even while you are alive, you can't go beyond that limit prescribed to you. The other ones is what the law takes over. However, I might not even be able to go deep into that. Now, let's listen to Justice Imam Sayi, who intends to speak to us about that's Al-Wasiyyah, purpose, efficiency, and the perception of the West. Again, Al-Wasiyyah, purpose, efficiency, and the perception of the West. However, before I do that, permit me to quickly read the file of, or let me say, introduce Imam Sayi to us all in this August gathering. So, ladies and gentlemen, Justice Abdurraheem Ahmad Sayi, a legal practitioner, a holder of LLB in Common and Islamic Law from Usman Danfodio University, Sokoto, is currently the principal partner of AA Sayi and Co, Kist Chambers and Kadi Independent Shariáh Panel of Lagos State, where he has delivered a number of reference judgments of in-depth analysis that have received wide applause from leading legal and intellectual icons, including learned judges, professor of law and Islamic studies. He is executive director, CEO, Clear Path Islamic Incorporated, Lekki, Lagos, and Chief Imam, Silver Point Central Mosque, Baduri Aja, Lagos. Justice Imam Sayi, as fondly called, is a member of Advisory Committee of Experts, Shariáh Advisory Committee, Sterling Bank PLC. He has authored a number of works and has to his credit several valuable and high-profile lectures and presentations, such as British Council lecture on peace building, the African Development Bank lecture on attaining sustainable economic development, Islamic perspective, Empire Conventional lecture of Islamic economics and national unity, Muslim Lawyers Association of Nigeria, continuing legal education lecture on administrative estate under Islamic law, numerous lecture across several Nigerian universities and colleges. He has a great passion for impactful impartation and strong bias for Islamic law, especially the relevance and effective application of Islamic law within the context and dynamics of contemporary intricacies. Hence, special concentration on Islamic commercial law, juristic exertion, base of legal opinion, philosophy, rationale, and intendment of Islamic law and Islamic procedural law. He holds a certificate on improving personal effectiveness from Lagos Business School, and he is a recipient of numerous awards and certificates of merit. Ladies and gentlemen of this august gathering, I present to you Justice Imam Sayi. Thank you very much.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين محمد صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We glorify Him. We testify to His oneness and to the prophethood and messengership of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. We pray Allah to continue to bless the soul of our noble prophet, those of his household, the entirety of his noble companions, and all the believers who have continued to tread this clear path till Allah inherits the heavens and the earth. Our brothers and sisters in Islam, I greet us in the Islamic greeting, saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
It is my pleasure being with my valued brothers and sisters to rub minds on this very important subject of our deen, which of course can be rated as wajib, nothing less. When we speak of Islamic inheritance, we speak of it in terms of fara'id, and that is the technical name that has been assigned to it, which of course would mean the plural of fard. All these denotes nothing other than the fundamentality of this aspect of our deen. I mean, meaning that there can be no arbitrariness. People wouldn't have to be whimsical when it comes to determining the distribution of the estates of Muslims after the demise of a Muslim, whether under the Fara'id and even under the Wasiyyah. I have also listened attentively to the presentation of my sister, Jazakallah Khairan, and I have heard her as well referred to the hadith which has literally made the bequest of a Muslim an obligation. I mean, if you really look at the words of that, the text of that hadith, it is not proper. I mean, for any Muslim to have 2 nights passing by without having his wasiyyah under his pillow, especially when there are going to be issues, especially we are not making wasiyyah in some particular circumstance can really bring about some complications. So I like to align with the view of all the scholars who have also said, while fara'id is an obligation, wasiyyah as well is also an obligation. Once you are having something to dispose of, something that is worthy enough, that has a value, every Muslim must understand this as well as a matter of obligation, that you've got a duty to your Lord and Creator. I mean, it is something that we shouldn't be looking at purely from the legal or juristic perspective. It should also be looked at even from the spiritual perspective. And that is to say that a Muslim may be held accountable before his Lord upon meeting him for failure to make his wasiyyah, especially where that is a necessity. That's why I have deemed this subject to be very important, and inshallah it's going to be a wake-up call for us all. Now I like to avoid overlap between what I'll be sharing, inshallah, and the details that have featured in the presentation of my dear sister. So I like to concentrate my presentation strictly on the subject of wasiyyah, which is usually and loosely, perceived as will, but which I would say is completely different, both in terms of the concept, even the form, and even the underlying jurisprudence that govern it, in contradistinction with the concept of will under the English common law. It is in any way not a will. Let's take it from the name. Will simply means uh, to dispose of an estate in absolute accordance with the will of the testator. And that is what makes it a will. That is the origin of that name, that noun, that vocabulary means it is in accordance with the will of the testator. But in under Islamic law, that is not the situation, because the right of ownership, the concept of ownership under Islamic law is a lot different from the concept of ownership under the other jurisprudence. In Islam, the ownership of everything lies with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Lahu ma fi samawati wa ma fil ard. Nobody in the real sense owns anything in absolute sense. Lillahi ma fi samawati wal ard. You have several verses of the Quran to that effect. And in a particular verse, I think in Surah Al-Najm, Allah particularly concludes one of such verses with the phrase, لِيَجْزِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسَاءُوا بِمَا عَمِلُوا وَيَجْزِيَ الَّذِينَ أَحْسَنُوا بِالْحُسْنَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having asserted the ownership of everything in the heavens and the earth, including the testator himself or herself, is one of the properties, belongings of Allah. So he owns or she owns nothing. And if he therefore, or if she therefore administers or manages that which has been given to him, in other words, we are just a trustees, we are just trustees, we are just not only trustees, I mean accountable trustees, questionable caretakers. That's exactly our position. And if we have been able to indeed abide with the rules that have been imposed on us by the real owner of these properties, and who shall also inherit everything in the end, Allah Azza wa Jalla, then in that case, لِيَجْزِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسَاءُوا بِمَا عَمِلُوا وَيَجْزِيَ الَّذِينَ أَحْسَنُوا بِالْحُسْنَى. Those who have been whimsical, arbitrary in the disposal of their properties, in the management of their resources, thinking and assuming a status that they do not have at all, thinking that they are the owner, and on account of that, misappropriate these that we have entrusted with them. Allah promises them an evil reward with in the hereafter. وَيَجْزِيَ الَّذِينَ أَحْسَنُوا بِالْحُسْنَى. And those who have also done well, by keeping to the principles, to the ordinances, to the rules and regulations regarding management or disposal of our affairs, especially with respect to our properties. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also promises them al-husna, the best of reward, which of course in the language of the Quran, al-husna simply means the Jannah. If we look at this verse, it simply means that the issue of fara'id and the issue of wasiyyah alone, under that heading alone, can be a reason why a Muslim can either find himself either in the Jannah or in the hellfire. And it's that simple. These are the boundaries of Allah. And warnings such as whoever obeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall be rewarded with the Jannah, and whoever transgresses this limit imposed by Allah shall end up in hellfire. Those are the conclusions of the verses of Mirah and Wasiyyah. The first point I'm trying to establish here is for all participants here to note that this issue is not a joke, it's a very fundamental aspect of our religion that we can't just wish away. One may not be able to reap the fruits of his endeavors in terms of the salah, the fasting, the hajj, the umrah, and all the other thing is, he seeks to place his honor upon if he has messed up himself in this area, so that we have to, have a rethink and be more serious and more conscious of this regard and never mess up ourselves before we meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's just to establish the spiritual basis that it is wajib. And when we say something is wajib, it means if you have failed to conduct yourself appropriately in that aspect, you may be prone to punishment even upon meeting Allah. It is as important as salah and as fasting. May Allah grant us the best of understanding. Now coming on to the subject of wasiyyah under Islamic law, it can be premised on a number of fundamentals, and that's what I'm going to go through, and then also discuss that in the light of the peculiar legal and jurisprudential realities that have characterized our situations primarily as Nigerians. Within the specific context of the Nigerian legal system, where we have an interplay of laws and of also jurisprudences, several enactments and legislations conflicting on this subject. And of course, you have Muslims as well being caught up in the web of some of these conflicting pieces of legal enactments, and it's often occur on a daily basis. First of all, to discuss wasiyyah, we are going to discuss these fundamentals. One, the musi, the person who is to make testamentary disposition. And having noted in the beginning that wasiyyah is not exactly as will, because it has its scope that you cannot exceed. It also has its limits. It also has some maybe restrictions. So it is not like will that is so open that you can give out whatever you want to whatever you will. Under Islamic law, wasiyyah, there are people who are disqualified from it, that you cannot extend your wasiyyah to them. And there is also limitation as to quantum to be given at all. Inshallah, we'll talk about that. And I think this also suffices from the background that had been laid in the previous lecture. So you have the testator, and then the beneficiaries of the testamentary disposition, the estate itself that is subject of the will. Then the last fundamental will be that the testamentary disposition on the part of the testator is merely considered as an expression of offer. So it does not pass any title to the proposed beneficiary until it has been formally, properly accepted. So let's start with the testator. The person who has owned a property legally has the right, who can be described as the legal owner, who has the proprietary interest, let me put it that way, over any property that he has rightfully acquired through any means of acquisition. The property itself could have been purchased by him. It could also have been inherited from his own parent. The title to that could have been passed on to him or her by some progenitor. It could have been gifted to him as well. In some extreme cases, though not too usual, people can also own property under some exceptional cases of lukpa or rikaz. Some buried treasures that were just discovered as fossils that maybe have attained some value. Those are extreme cases. What I'm saying is whatever property that can be rightly attributed to a person as the proprietary owner of that person, whatever one is having up to, you can always make a testamentary disposition on that. And regarding the person of the testator, it is expected that at the time that he's making the testamentary disposition, is expected to be sane. Should be sane. It's also expected not to be under any form of inhibition, which is most unlikely this time around. So whoever is making be inhibited in terms of his mental capacity, his right of ownership must subsist as at the time is making that property, that disposition. It may not matter under testamentary disposition whether the person is a Muslim or a non-Muslim. And this is one of the distinctive features of Wasiyyah as compared to Mira. I had my sister listing what could be inhibit a person from partaking in inheritance. And one of the factors that have been mentioned is differences of religion. Under the hadith, لا يرث الكافر المسلم ولا يرث المسلم الكافر. It works in both ways. A Muslim does not inherit a non-Muslim, and a non-Muslim does not as well inherit a Muslim, subject to some slight juristic differences on the other side of it. But this is clear from the text of the hadith that لا يرث الكافر المسلم ولا يرث المسلم الكافر. Once there is difference of religion, then it means that the law of personal status under which the estate will be distributed has conflicted as between the legator and the legatee. And on that basis, they are not related, legally speaking, because the law that binds them together, I mean, the faith, difference in faith, also the faith of the person who has been deceased is also one of the legacies that he has left behind. And that faith determines how his material belongings would have to be distributed. So if there is, but in terms of Wasiyyah, it is not necessary. That is not a requirement. A Muslim can bequeath property to persons who are non-Muslims, and it is not also haram for a Muslim as well to accept a bequest even from a non-Muslim. Then we come to the property that has been bequeathed under the Wasiyyah. As has been said earlier on, the hadith is الثلث والثلث كثير لأن تترك ورثتك أغنياء خير من أن تتركهم فقراء يتكفون الناس. That beautiful hadith of Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas radiyallahu anhu, where the Messenger of Allah had said, just a thought, and even a thought is too much. Can you understand that? A thought was thuluthu kathir. Even a thought is much. To give out as much as a thought, to exhaust the whole of a thought, a charity, and give out that is kathir. That's the word of the Prophet. It's much, even though it's tolerated. I mean, exhausting one thought is not the best, but that is the maximum, that is the limit of Islamic tolerance. Okay? So meaning to do less than a thought would always be noble, because the affair of the Muslim is always best when it is in the middle class. وَلَقَدْ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. And the poet also says, كِلَا طَرَفَيْ قَصْدِ الْأُمُورِ ذَمِيمٍ. The two extremes of moderation would always be blameworthy. So the mere fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes the limit as a thought really doesn't make it mandatory on anyone to exhaust that limit. Noting that the Messenger of Allah has said, وَثُلُثُ كَثِيرٌ. Now, you don't have the right under Islamic law to dispose anything in excess of 1/3 of your property. Now we go to the beneficiaries. And one thing to be said about this, coming to the subject of testamentary disposition, is that Wasiyyah comes after the settlement of debts, whether debts of Allah or debts of mankind, regardless of the order in which the two comes in the Quran. Because what you always find in the Quran is min ba'di wasiyyatin yusa biha aw dayn, min ba'di wasiyyatin tusuna biha aw dayn, or min ba'di wasiyyatin yusina biha aw dayn. You can have that expression in 3 places, in which all the 3 places you can have wasiyyah coming before death. But by the consensus of the jurists of Islam, wasiyyah in administration of estate of a deceased Muslim only comes after the settlement of obligations. So, and that is the essence of that sequence, meaning you only think of wasiyyah if the debt has been settled, and debt can also include even debts of Allah, like zakat, or like maybe a vow that has been made in material form. That if my wife gives me a baby son, a baby boy, I'm going to build a mosque, I'm going to complete an ongoing mosque project, and that was also announced, and that becomes a vow. It is not that debt is owed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The debt as well that are owed to people, or somehow you can also have debt owed to Allah in the form of kafara. And that is where one has committed a sin, repentance from which also requires, apart from sobriety and seeking Allah's forgiveness, also requires as well paying some form of atonement. And that had not been performed before death overtakes the person. So immediately he dies, all those obligations would have to, first of all, be taken care of. And whatever is next then is to be inherited. So to some extent as well, we can say that wasiyyah as well takes precedence over mirror. Whatever a person has left behind, a third of it can go to wasiyyah, and it's until the wasiyyah has been taken out, then that is when the heirs can also have something to inherit. The person who is the beneficiary of wasiyyah is the third fundamental of wasiyyah, in testamentary disposition under Islamic law. Okay, let me also say this, and that's also very important. Wasiyyah takes effect only after the death of the person. It is different from gift intervals. When we say giver is to be given out by that person in his lifetime, and it takes effect as well in the lifetime of the wahib. That is the donor who is giving a gift to another. But when it comes to wasiyyah, it doesn't take effect until the demise of the person. So when he goes, then whatever he has dictated in his wasiyyah takes effect after. Then we now come to the person who is the beneficiary. Like we have said, the mere fact that a will has been made, a testamentary disposition has been made in favor of someone, really doesn't confer any right of inheritance. It is also required that the person in whose favor a wasiyyah has been made is also expected to formally accept that wasiyyah. If he has not accepted it and it's not binding, one can make a will to someone and you can have a reason or a personal, may Allah reward your father, and he has been so kind, and Allah make that nice place, but alhamdulillah, I think I'm not interested in the will, and then that's all. And the will reverts back, to the estate. This offer and acceptance offer is made by the expressions of the will, then the acceptance is made after the demise of the person, by the people in whose favor the wasiyyah has been made. In essence, these are the fundamentals of will. Now coming to the purpose, why mirath alone may not satisfy all interests under Islamic law, and why it is the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having also given us clearly detailed, very comprehensive, exhaustive, not common to any other religious group of civilization other than Islam. One of the distinctive features of Islamic religion, one of the things that place Muslims ahead of all other religions, all other civilizations of the world, is our heritage of Fara'id, because it's not like any other, and it's just top notch. It radiates principles of justice to the minutest detail in every bit of it. But we can't be surprised because that has come from the all-knowing, the all-wise. But in spite of how detailed is mirath, the Islamic law of inheritance, Allah in His wisdom has also left the window of wasiyyah, because there are certain situations that can only be taken care of by that. For example, we've had now we have understood from the previous lectures we've had that there are certain things that can make a person entitled to inheritance. A relationship by blood is either you are an ascendant to the deceased person, the estate of whom is subject of distribution, or you are a descendant of him, or you are also connected by blood relation. When we now talk of the classes of siblings now, whether germane, whether consanguine, whether uterine, all there is an affinity of a sort in terms of marriage, sort of. So maybe in the olden days, you can have what we'll call wala, someone being a former slave of another one, and then he was the one who set him free, and there was this relationship. But I don't think that is really obtainable in the present time. So we are now left with basis of relationships that are rooted in blood or in marriage relationship. But there could be people important to the testators, and who could have also played fundamental role, who could have even been the secret of the success or achievement of the testator, or the testator just in the charitable spirit as well, wanting to extend to people who ordinarily are not entitled, which is of course the counsel of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the Quran speaks in different forms. There are instances where Allah merely advises and may not make certain things obligatory. But to anyone who is wise enough should have understood that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has advised, as in a subtle manner invited us to, would always be in our own best interest. Allah says, وَإِذَا حَضَرَ الْقِسْمَةَ أُولُو الْقُرْبَى فَأْتُوهُمْ مِنْهَا. When the people who are related to you but are not legally entitled to inheritance, perchance just happens to be aware of the distribution process when it was going on. Not an order, not a command. Allah says, give them out of it by way of persuasion. Not a son, not a daughter, not even connect, but somehow because the deceased person has left behind a son, but there is also a brother who could have inherited had it been there was no son or survived by a father who tell the counsel of Allah in this regard to the inheritors, the heirs, who are now the so-called quote and unquote I've said absolute ownership belongs to Allah, but upon the demise of the original owner, owner trustee, owner caretaker, then the heirs assume the step into his shoes. This counsel can be sold to them, and if they have welcomed it, inshallah, there will be no problem. Give them out of their will. Another way of meeting that same end that the Quran has called on to is for the testator himself to exercise the prerogative which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him under the Wasiyyah. You know, of course, that you have a son. The presence of a son or several sons after your demise will definitely exclude all your siblings. And you know that you have some of your siblings, whether elder brother or elder sister, who are still dependent on you. If there is a message I want us to take away here, is for us to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes in the Quran not only the legal values alone. See, a Muslim at all time must always be guided by three values simultaneously: the legal value, the moral value, and also the spiritual value. We must be subjected to the standard of legality, morality, and spirituality, because not in all cases would the hudud of the Shariáh meet all the situations. Yes. Do your brothers have any stake in your estate after your demise, having been survived by sons and daughters? No, absolutely. And no one can do anything about that. But that is the limit of the law. But there are values that can be superior sometimes to legal values, especially the spiritual value. I mean by the spiritual value, values the end of which is only about attaining the pleasure of Allah, regardless of whether you have an obligation to do that or not, regardless of whether the beneficiary of that has a right to that or not. You are only set out to do that which is closest in making you attaining the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we leave everything to be determined by law alone after our demise, several other vital values will be jeopardized. In this regard, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the testator the prerogative of filling this gap that the law cannot fill. So, my dear brother, my sister, my aunt, who will have no share in my inheritance and who have been dependent on me, if I should die now, they are going to be in a kind of a crisis, financial crisis. It is expected that you attempt to settle them. And this is one of the areas keeping the tie of kinship, showing generosity, also as well, even protecting your children, not making them be victims of envy, or not also breeding enmity against them by making them unnecessarily subjects of envy. Just take it out some little, settle all those, if you like, call them witches and wizards, whatever. settle them so that your children as well can be in peace. It is in this same text that says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was advising, وَلْيَخْشَ الَّذِينَ لَوْ تَرَكُوا مِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ. This is an advice, but let us all be aware that this is a reality that happens. وَلْيَخْشَ الَّذِينَ لَوْ تَرَكُوا مِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّةً ضِعَافًا خَافُوا عَلَيْهِمْ فَلْيَتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَلْيَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا. Allah advising now the relations, especially the ones who may not be entitled to inheritance. الذين لو تركوا من خلفهم ذرية ضعافا خافوا عليهم. Those who, if they were the ones who had left these weak orphans, these innocent boys and girls who have only just been fortunate to have come to the world through a father that had amassed so much, خافوا عليهم. They also would not just some fear over their children. Allah calls them to order as well. فَلْيَتَّقُوا اللَّهَ. Let them fear Allah and do to the estate of their kinsman as they would want to be done to their own children if they were the ones who are covered up in the dust and leaving behind dependents who are still weak at the time of their death. You can see Allah, He had advised those Baba Seku, those who may just develop any undefendable interest in the estate, just, it's my immediate elder brother, and he has too much. How can I not have any? No, I can just take offense from that. That verse is a counsel to them that they should please take it and not met out any wickedness to these innocent and poor children. But as Allah is advising them on one hand, He's also telling you here as well not to be greedy. Can you see how Allah balances equation? This is not standard of legality. Now we are not talking the law. We are simply talking morality. And Allah advises as well the heirs. وَإِذَا حَضَرَ وَإِذَا حَضَرَ الْقِسْمَةَ أُولُو الْقُرْبَى. When those who are near in relation, the blood relations, whose eyes are wide open, so the inheritance that is to be shared, and they are not rightful owners to it. But of course, they are aware. They knew a family meeting was going on and what is being done in the place to whom Allah says, give them out of it. It is not only your children that have contributions to your life, not even your wife. There are people who even are the secrets of how you are made. You are not also expected to be, even if you are not legally obliged, you are seriously encouraged as a Muslim to be generous. And that category of people who are not legally entitled, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you as well to extend some things to them. That is one of the purposes of Wasiyyah. Another purpose is where there is even legal hindrance to inheritance. For example, conflict of religion. A man is married to a wife whom he so much loves, and of course, there is that window in the glorious Quran that a Muslim male, if he chooses, even though it is only a permissibility, Allah has not particularly encouraged that. What has rather been encouraged is to find among those of us who are Muslim. That is, minkum ayyuhal muslimun. Marry from among those who are single, women who are not in wedlock with anyone, among you Muslims. That is the commandment of Allah. But there is also a window of permissibility. وَالْمُحْصَنَاتُ مِنَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ, up till the end of the verse. If one chooses, and if one also feels that you stand the position to have the woman during the subsistence of the marriage, have her converted or reverted into Islam, that is also, it's a window of da'wah. But we know there are instances where that may not be the case at all. So you are dying and you know you have a wife who the law will exclude from your inheritance on account of conflict of religion. It's going to be wise for you to make that woman, succeed you. Let me not use the word inheritance. Maybe a partaker of whatever you'll be leaving behind as legacy under Wasiyyah. Sometimes you have cases of illegitimacy, even of children. Cases cases of legal impediments such as that can be taken care of. And that is also one of the reasons why Allah in His wisdom has left that window, so that people who would have been excluded by law can at least be given something that could be worthy and satisfactory enough from the will of the person, who had left behind the properties. Yes, charity and sadaqah is also another reason why there has to be, because if you are to leave everybody alone to start, especially, subhanallah, people who have not worked for anything, for something, are always the most greedy about it. I wouldn't want to sow any seed wouldn't want to sow any negative seed in the heart of any parent or any father. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very right when He said, Inna min azwajikum wa awladikum aduwwan lakum fahdharuhum. You really have among your wives and among your children people who really are enemies unto you. Be careful of them. Enemies in terms of not wanting what you desire. In the course of our calling, our regular job, we've seen a lot. We have children and mothers, wives of the deceased are conspiring and are unanimous against the wish and desire, legal one, of course, of their father. The man who will stand before Allah to render account for this property. For the Messenger of Allah said, "Man tazala قدم امرئ في موقف القيامة حتى يسأل عن أربع." No one will be allowed to move an inch before Allah on the day of Qiyamah, a believer. Before you are cleared, you must be cleared of 4 things. One of which, the last each way, is وعن ماله من أين اكتسبه وفيما أنفقه. Regarding his wealth, from what source has he acquired them, and in what source as well as he expended them. You have 2 questions to answer. And you have instances where you have a father wants to give his property, having left so much for the kids, and there is still this conspiracy that no. And perhaps that is going to be the ransom that man would pay to save him from the torment of hellfire. It is the children that have stood against it. Are they lovers of the father, or they are more, or they are enemies? I think the case is clear. You have instances where you find the heirs so greedy. Where you have greedy heirs, and you wouldn't know, you may not know the character of the children and wives you are having while you are alive. It may just be theatrical performances all this while, and then the real nature may have to play out after their death. If you really need to settle your hereafter, my dear brothers and sisters, for you are the one who are going to stand. Like Allah, it's not an easy thing to stand a trial before Allah. Lord, please settle yourself before you go. And one of the ways in which you can settle yourself before you go is make your wasiyyah very formal, very strong, make it meet, of course, the requirements of all laws applicable, so that on no account would any greedy son or greedy wife conspire to truncate it. In fact, if you can be smarter as well, do the home for yourself in the hereafter, right now, while you are alive. Yeah, Wasiyyah is an option. You also have an option. Cough out that mosque, money now, build that mosque, build that madrasa, build that hospital, make it functional in your own life. Hand it over to trustees. Create that waqf in your, so that whenever you are even writing any will in your wasiyyah, you are only confirming what you have started, and you are simply excluding that in your wasiyyah, in your properties, making absolute, clear, solemn declarations that these are not subject of your inheritance and they are not, it's not good. So this is also some of the reasons, because if you want to be charitable, then this is the window. وَمَنْ يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Because the real nature of human beings is for us to be greedy and covetous. And Allah says, whoever has been cured of the greed, the innate greed of the soul that is natural with every man, those are the ones who are successful. But as for those who care not about anyone except maybe themselves or their children, I don't know whether they can be described as being among the successful, because that verse has a natural reverse implication, meaning those who have not been so pure are not, of course, embraced in the folk of the successful. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala count us among. So, one of the reasons why we have to make will is to create instrument of waqf. It is always created under, especially for the purpose of perpetuity. Even if you had started it, you have it's even operational in your life, so you can change. Your children can just cook up something and then redefine it and just say something. No. If it is work, then the best way to make that an issue is to make it a content of your will. That this is excluded from your estate, appoint the trustees, then declare it as well. This is for a charity. And for so many other reasons. I mean, these are the most important reasons why we can have a will. But let's come to the perspective of the West on this subject, and I need to please quickly round up. I'm part of a program now, which I'm hearing from the background that they've started, so I need to be joining them in a very short time. But inshallah, we'll be concluding on a good note. All this together, we have to look at it not only from the core angle of Sharia, and how do we fit this within the legal and juristic realities of our legal system in Nigeria. Unfortunately, Nigeria is not a monolithic country when it comes to the laws that operate within this entity called the Federal Republic of Nigeria. As between the north and the south, there is a wide gap when it comes to applicability of Islamic law. Even though the most recent decision of the Supreme Court, if I can remember the case title, inshallah, mention it very recently. It's the case that evolved from my state, the Kwara state. The law is settled that the law of personal status of a Muslim is the Islamic law. But where a Muslim resides in states within the federation, where there are no institutional frameworks for applicability of that, there is always a crisis. And that is why you'll see that up till now, Muslims still write will under the Wills Act or under the Wills Law as domesticated by the various states of the Federation. But the Wills Act, as it was, an imported law from your colonial masters, and we are still yet to give ourselves the necessary freedom, even up till now. That's not the case. And the opposite of dying testate by making a will is dying intestate. And what comes to play, especially when one has also gone to tie his hand by entering into an Islamically illegal marriage under the Act, then you create another problem. Bringing yourself under the provision of another law, which is at the administration of estate law. that applies to people who are married in accordance with Christian culture and tradition, who are monogamous in their marriage and things like that. And these are the issues that the Muslims really should be careful about. On no account should any man who is serious allow himself to be brought outside the realm of the law of Allah and His Messenger. And then please go and read the Marriage Act. And then that act that if you die, having been married under that act, and you have died intestate, then what will apply to the distribution of your estate will be the administration of estate law. That will be the entirety of your properties to the surviving spouse. Even if you have another woman who has also given very wonderful, birth to very wonderful children to you, you now create a crisis of conflict of which law is applicable. And then you'll be giving judges and courts of law unnecessary assignment. You are a Muslim. Stand by La ilaha illallah, Muhammadun Rasulullah. Let that be sufficient for you. But in case you are afraid of a crisis, I can also teach you to practically explore the same law. Okay, in your state, there are no institutions of Shariah. What is available is just the Wills Law or the Wills Act, the administration of estate law, and you want to avoid the implication of that deadly, unjust, archaic, we can call it brutal and cruel law. So to say, the administration of estate law is very far from justice. And this we can defend, especially when you compare to the standard of justice and equity that has been displayed by Islamic law of inheritance and wasiyyah. Make your will, make it fulfill all the requirements of that law. Yes, it's not our law, but we are in a situation of necessity now. And then, first paragraph, appoint your trustees. The second paragraph, declare your heirs. The third paragraph, declare as well your estate. And then the fourth paragraph, declare, direct your trustees to distribute your estates upon your demise in accordance with the provisions of Islamic law, quote the Quran, quote the verse, quote the Sunnah. By that your will exclude the applicability of any law, because that will give you the power. So we are now going to use their law against them. So it is, they say it's absolute will. So exclude whatever law that you don't want to be applicable to the distribution of your estate, and then direct that your estate be distributed in accordance with the Islamic law. Appoint your trustees who are learned. If you cannot appoint individuals, appoint institutions. There are now bodies, law firms, even courts of law. The various Shariáh courts of appeal have registry that can, administer your estate. And maybe paragraph 5, putting a very solemn curse on whoever makes any attempt to alter your will as has been. That is for those of us who are living in jurisdictions that are not governed by Sharia, where the Sharia law is not rooted and there are no institutions that can, be responsible for application of Islamic law. This is not the case with my brothers and sisters from the northern Nigeria, from the northern Nigeria from Kwara upward. In fact, our administration of estate law in Kwara State and in many northern states, and even the wills law of the state, by the opening section, section 1 and 2 of each of the laws respectively, has excluded the estates that are subject to Islamic law from being subject to that law. And that is the aftermath of the case of Yunus and Adishubu, where my Lord, late Justice Muhammad Bello of blessed memory, gave a judgment in defense of Islamic law, and then the big guys up there in the Supreme Court upon it, that the law was necessarily in conflict with the Wills Act. Simply a law that was absolutely unjust. I can see that I don't have enough time. I could have just shared a little of the gist of that judgment. So Ever since I would say, you know what, so that decision had always given even a Muslim a prerogative to distribute his estate according to his will. But now in many northern states, including Kwara, if you are doing that, unless if that will is not challenged, if you are a Muslim, indigene, and you live your life according to Islam, if you make any law, any will, you are just making a void will. It's going to fail in the court of law. But as for those who are not protected by any law of their state, I think that is the way to go. Let me take a pause here. It's a bit a wide subject, and I don't think we can cover all the issues in one sitting. And I can also see the face of the moderator as well coming up. I want to take that as well as a signal that maybe my time is up. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Walaikum salam. Walaikum salam. Thank you very much, Justice. Thank you very much. In fact, I did think that we have time on our hand. I strongly believe that in terms of the listeners of the webinar, only in that we are actually enjoying the lecture and would actually wish to enjoy it further, but due to time constraints, we have to the realities. So thank you once again. Personally, for me, I will remark that the lecture was actually giving me nostalgia of the Salat days when we are in the university listening to our lecturers, lecturing us what we need to know about Islamic laws of succession or inheritance, as the case may be. So thank you very much once again. And I believe that there are individuals here who have questions based on what Justice have actually lectured us about. However, before we look at that, permit me to quickly summarize briefly what to take away from your lecture. So basically, we look at the purpose. So having established the Wasiyyah itself again, you gave an addendum to the previous lecture of the previous speaker, Mrs. Kumar, and in talking about the conditions for the Wasiyyah itself, talking about the sanity of the person who wants to make the bequest, that he mustn't do it under duress, that he must exert right of ownership over the subject property. And then, as a bequest, religion may not matter whether you want to, so long you have prerogative over that part, you can give to a non-Muslim and you can also receive same non-Muslim. Then we'll talk about the purpose. So basically to exercise the prerogative to fill in the gap where the law has actually created, meaning that there are persons whom within your own endearment, within your own interest group, they may not ordinarily be able to benefit from the estate by virtue of the existence of the legal heirs. So why not take care of them? Because we cannot wait for that reality otherwise, whether they can benefit, then you can actually take care of them while you still can. And that is the essence of then we talk about the perspective of the West. Basically, we look at the conflicting principles between Islamic principles and the conventional laws, basically in Nigeria, in non-secular states, and we have legal, the common law system which operates even to then subterfuge the wide principles of Islamic law and other Muslim law as well. So thank you very much for that. And on that, I have a question here. Had earlier been asked, saying that what if a person has actually given out 100% of his property while he was alive, then when he's dead, can he still give one gift? I think the answer is not far-fetched. It has been repeated over and over in the course of the lecture. While you are giving gifts while you're alive, that can be a work fee, is a gift that is written, is binding, is enforceable. It does not affect the entirety of your estate. But then how then do you give 100% of your estate? There's nothing to give as a will again. So you can't give out 100% of your estate and still say maybe there's some estate there to be subject to wasiyyah or inheritance. Of course, the answer there is clear. For you to give a part of it, the rest of it is then subject to your wasiyyah and which is guided by law. Then the new question says, clarify, are Muslims not to marry under the Marriage Act? Are there other legislation in Nigeria? While this is a very interesting topic for apologies that we may not be able to answer that, one, because of time constraint, and two, it is not within the confines of this webinar. Otherwise, we'll be digressing and going deeper and deeper into a discourse, which we need to create another webinar for. So, but then we can also answer this question privately, where if the speaker intends to get a very valid answer to that. But we might not be able to think that here is outside the confines of this webinar. Before we then wrap up, if there we can entertain one or two more questions before we can wrap up. However, while we are waiting for the effective questions, permit me to reiterate the existence of Trust Author Limited, a non-impact finance company, an asset management company, fund and portfolio management company, duly licensed by SEC. And then the business of the company is within the confines of Islamic law, ethical investments, and allied transactions as well. So feel free to walk into the office number 11 Okwawo Street, Victoria Island, Lagos. So the door is open to Muslims and non-Muslims alike for the purpose of maximizing intended profits in the legal and ethical business that we have in mind to do. So the door is open to all and sundry. Thank you very much. So if there are other questions, we'll quickly take them down now. Otherwise, with questions, observations, remark, suggestion, advice, let's have it, please. Thank you. Okay, in absence of me, permit me to summarize the entirety of this webinar. Today's webinar, it talks about Al-Wasiyyah, the purpose. So it talks about Al-Wasiyyah, purpose, efficiency, and perception of the West. And subtext of the webinar is looking at Islamic law of inheritance, women, and the society. And so far, we believe we've been able to do justice to this discourse, where we look at Al-Wasiyyah as a whole and establishing its purpose, its efficiency, and the perception of the West. And from the lecture that has just been had now, it says that the perception of the West is that there is still an existing conflict of law between this principle and then the general principle that operates in Nigeria as a whole. And they're talking about Islamic law of inheritance and women and society. So we are able to understand that women have equal rights, just as men, in the eye of the Almighty, who is a lawgiver of the laws that we are bound by as Muslims. Therefore, women are entitled to inherit from the deceased, whether women as in terms of a wife to the deceased, or a daughter to the deceased, or even relative to the deceased, subject to different principles, and also the fraction of the devolution of the deceased. So we have them in different fractions. So there's nowhere so far under the laws and through this lecture that precludes a woman from inheriting property on whatever status she finds herself. Like I said, either as a wife status or either as a daughter status, even either as a sibling status. Women are not in any way precluded from inheriting estate of the deceased. It is only then subject to certain principles or certain fraction. It could come in form of 1/4 or 2/3 as a daughter, 1/4 as a wife, following the principle that is a precondition before then, where the fraction then changes. So thank you very much for staying with us this far. We really appreciate your patience. We appreciate your rapt attention, and we pray that Almighty God will accept our act of worship. And we really appreciate you for the constant presence to our invitation to our webinar. Again, we are open to all and sundry for prospective businesses which will be beneficial and high profiting to both parties. Thank you very much. To come to the end of today's webinar, and we hope to see you again when we have another high learning discussion will come up from our end. Thank you very much. May God bless you. Thank you.